Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Chris Brogan, a best-selling author, the chief of staff for a software company called AppFire, and a man I know to be a kind and creative human being. Chris, I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
Doctor, always a pleasure to be in your orbit. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I was thinking it's probably going on 20 years since our paths first crossed, and I've been a loyal reader of your newsletters. We've interacted in various ways, and your beard keeps getting a little more white. So I'm looking forward to tapping that life experience today. I always appreciate when someone offers me the opportunity to kind of share the threads that unite my life from outside in. I think it can look disjointed, but from inside out, it seems to make sense to me. What would you say are those threads that really weave your life together and influence your decisions that you make on a daily basis?
I think of this question a lot, actually. So I love it. It's one of your first ones because it's something that I think a lot of people, if they have the opportunity to examine their world from that perspective, it's a lot more helpful because I almost think of the way actors use it in the abstract when they're making a film or something. They'll say, what's my motivation here? Like, what am I really thinking while I'm, drinking this cup of coffee in this scene, which is so silly, from the outside, but you have to think sometimes when you're watching a movie, this person has to really look like they're in this moment. And, his dad just died and he's worried that he can't take over the family business and he's not even sure what that entails. So my version of that, the Chris Brogan set of threads, one easy one is I was born in Maine and I was born in the capital city, Augusta, which is too small to really be a city and too big to be the country. So it's like the worst of all worlds. It's very suburban. And not super cultural. I mean, we had French Americans and we had Irish Americans, and it was a very small world. There were three conversations when I was growing up, which was either Led Zeppelin or Van Halen. My answer was Van Halen. It was Mustang or Camaro. And would the Red Sox ever win a World Series? Can't happen, which I was finally proven wrong. But for a long time, I was absolutely right. And I wanted more. Like I wanted some way to talk about the really important things in life. Like, could Superman actually beat the Hulk? Like that's so much more important. And so I got involved in technology really early from that mindset. Like I got into computers because my dad showed me these things called modems, in which I could have conversations on what were bulletin board services. Now, you and I might remember this again because of being of a certain age, but bulletin board services, if imagine Twitter, but everyone has to dial in one at a time on an actual phone line that can only have one call going at a time or a couple calls if you were really rich. So someone would say, I really hate this new Star Wars movie. And then they'd hang up. And then I'd have to log in and go, well, you're a jerk. And then I'd hang up. And then they'd have to dial back and be like, well, you're wrong. It was like the least useful way to implement this kind of communications technology. But even back then, I thought, this is neat. So that's thread one. Thread one is, can I communicate with people wherever they are, anywhere in the world about the things I care about, not just proximate information. There is a time and a place and a wonder about information in a setting, in a context, but could I communicate in a proximate way? So that's thread one. Thread two has always been an offshoot of that thread. How do you use technology to drive better human interaction? So I've been called over time this social media guy, this blogging guy, this podcasting guy. Any technology I seem to use, they think I'm that guy because I was early, but not the first on a lot of these things. All I wanted to do in every single case, Doc, I just wanted to communicate with people about interesting things and try to make a better interaction. So I got hired by some of the biggest companies in the world to show them how can you be human at a distance, which is why I wrote the book Trust Agents with Julian Smith in 2009. It's been a real anchor tenet of who I am. And I guess third is, I was just thinking about this 3 hours ago, driving up the road. I was thinking, wow, there are some people in life who walk around thinking, oh, I hope I can show other people this thing I just learned. And that is me all the time ad nauseum. I will always have things I want to show other people. Hey, look at this thing. And I could be so annoying from the outside. I used to very much like if I got on a diet, I wanted everyone to be on my diet with me. And I would overwhelm you with details and information you had no interest in. And very 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 fixated on certain topics. And so that's the third one. The third one is I always want to be helpful. I want to show people. I think being helpful or useful is the pinnacle compliment you could give another human being, which a lot of people find somewhat lackluster when they hear it. I like that person. They're really useful. They're always like, what? But I think that that's so much better than so many other. I mean, kind, I think, is obviously a pretty important one, but I think right after that would be useful, because I mean, just how many people do we know they're wonderful, or they're engaging, or they're something, but they might not be all that helpful. You know, they might not be the kind of person you can draw from multiple times. So there you go. There's my 3 threads. How's that sound?
Very cool. Be kind, be useful. And another aspect I look for is to look for beauty, point out beauty in this world. But I'm tracking you so far, Chris. So the container for today's conversation is human resilience. What are your initial thoughts on resilience, whether how you define it, how you see it? Talk about resilience.
I love being asked this question because I'm not an especially resilient person, and I've had to really fight for my ground at every turn for all of what, you know, makes up my resilience. At every turn, I've had scenarios where I fail first, I fall down first. I deal with a very minor case of major clinical depression. There's lots of things that in sort of my makeup that make me the opposite of the poster child for this conversation, except that our mutual friend, Dr. Robert Brooks, he likes to say you're a very, very energetic and enthusiastic layperson. And he goes, and I love hearing things from your point of view, because it's from the bedside, not from the chair side. And I said, I really love that. So resilience to me, what I've come to understand is, I mean, you could sum it up in a Chumbawamba song. I get knocked down, but I get up again. I really just think over and over again that this is life. Life is, can I keep going? What are the tools I need to keep going? And for instance, one of the things I never thought was that some sense of a social fabric is one of the core things for resilience. I thought it was an internal only kind of thing. Once I learned that, everything got a little better and easier, because I went, oh, I didn't have to bring every part of the recipe. I just had to bring some ingredients with me.
I love that you have learned and integrated that lesson, because I think it's a common myth around resilience. It's grit, it's suck it up, it's pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and it's not when you know the research. It's about relationships and resources. And then there's a lot of coping skills and things we can grow from there, but those are the cornerstones. One of your, I think of it as one of your pet projects, you've just kind of introduced it here or there in your newsletters, is called Dented. And my understanding is you help people realize that they can have a mental health challenge, depression, anxiety, stress, and still be productive, still be contributing, still find ways to thrive at work. Talk about Dented.
So it is a project that I keep putting on a shelf and then taking off the shelf and then putting back on the shelf. It's one of those books that when I'm feeling horrendous, I think there's such value to it. When I'm feeling great, I have a hard time accessing some of what I want to cover with people. It sort of makes sense in a lot of ways, but like I need to be mentally solid enough to be able to write it, but I need to be in a bit of a shambles so I can say, oh yeah, this is what I go to fix those things. And I've had a good run. I should knock on something. I've had a good run lately, so it's been harder to write about it. The idea really just came from, there's a lot of terms that we use in mental health. Like for instance, I always say I deal with depression. I never say I'm a victim of depression, or I have depression, or I suffer from depression. I think the word suffer is much better reserved for much other things. I don't, I think depression causes a lot of suffering. But, some days it just means I can't really choose to get out of bed. I don't know that I'm suffering. I'm in my bed. I have a real aversion to mailing things. I don't know what it is. It's executive function disorder is the textbook part of it. Can't mail things. I don't feel like I'm suffering. I just feel like I'm going to get an angry call from the electric company and saying, why can't you just pay bills like normal people? So I think with Dented, what I wanted to show is that I could be the kind of guy who has trouble remembering or choosing to, do things like, fill out the passport application. And I can be, I'm an executive at a company with executive function disorder. I'm an executive at a company who has severe clinical depression, so I need to sometimes not have as many meetings as what you'd expect an executive to have, but you can navigate your way through. And that's the part that's hard to hear when you're in the worst of it. And the part that is also hard to believe when you're kind of looking from the outside is, how can you be successful if you're dealing with that? And I always try to say, it's not super easy, doc. Like the paint can get really scuffed. That's the whole idea of dented. You're a shiny new car, and then you back into a foam hole, and you can't afford to repair it. You just leave the dent. That's dented, right? We're not in an inoperable state, but we're not our shiniest, newest. And I think that every time I brought that up with people, even just the premise, even if I said, if I wrote a book about dented, where the word dented just sort of means you can function, but you've got a few things going wrong, what do you think? I got back sort of a stone soup experience where people would say, oh, but if you added some onions to this would be great. If you added something about people who had sexual traumas, that'd be great. You could talk to people who have I was like, yes, except I've had none of those experiences. So I think that's how I kind of put that together. And in my mind, when that project finally finds its way to a book or a something, my only real goal is that I can give people a couple more tools that they didn't have, and at least a sense of a small, simple treasure map to how they can get to where they want to go.
Yeah, and you've already said, you're not wired as the most positive person, and you share your journey. You share your journey with clinical depression and suicide ideation, and in the past, and where you are, you just share your journey, right? And so I thank you for that. That's why we're sitting here talking today. I have such great respect for that. And you also share your journey of thinking and operating in a more positive way that doesn't come natural to you. So what have you learned along that journey?
I think it's a good question, and I know you prompted me for it. I think that the thing I learned the most is a song lyric. Again, it's Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers from Can't Stop. He just says, complete the motion if you stumble. What I think most people get bogged down on, sort of if you're balancing and weighing things, I think most people get stuck on this idea of, oh no, I've messed up. And then they lock up and stop doing anything. And what I've learned in life is, oh no, I've messed up. I got to try again. I got to do something else. I've got to pick another path. I think if you just did that one thing, all of the other bigger problems get a little bit more solvable.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there. And there's so much, you think of someone running a marathon and they trip at mile 17, they don't go back to the start line, right? They pick themselves up and they run from there. There's a lot of wisdom in that. So thank you, Chris, and viewers, stay with us. We are going to continue to talk mental health, resilience, and thriving at work.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power, and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared, and you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Oh boy. Our back and forth. It always came back. Dad! You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Chris Brogan, a best-selling author and Chief of Staff at AppFire. Chris, in your job as Chief of Staff, you do a lot of coaching. You also support that leadership executive team. So I want to take advantage of that and benefit our viewers with some coaching today. But first I have a leadership question, and it's about vision. You know, leaders, certainly entrepreneurs, are tasked with being visionary. We need to believe something that doesn't exist before it does, as if it does, convince others, that it does. Talk about that process of bringing vision to life.
So similar to other words that are in kind of my danger zone, when someone is called a visionary, I tend to make yucky faces. When someone's called a thought leader, I go, oh, brother. But I do think that there are visionaries. I am blessed right now to work with a person who I do absolutely think owns that title, but they're not in that like Steve Jobs crazy look over the side, way off into the million miles, but they have a really long, what they call event horizon, a vision horizon. They can see years out, not months out. Bill Gates was famous for that. Bill Gates could see 10 years or more easily and very accurately predicting 10 years out. Just not most people. Most people, 6 months is a lot. And for me, it could be later this afternoon. So I could say that when I look at the people who have vision, I think there's an importance in having that vision and being able to really clearly articulate it repeatedly. You have to be so good. This is a term I've used, I think since like 06. Give your ideas handles. Put your idea in a neat little suitcase, give it a handle so someone else can take it and they can also run with the idea. I launched a thing called My 3 Words. The idea was, instead of trying to come up with one important word at the beginning of every year, let's do 3 words that can let you sort of triangulate and find meaning in the year that you're going to have, and make the 3 words really useful so that you can really kind of navigate life with them. I did it so that thousands and then tens of thousands of people would go and run with it and do something with it. And now every year, many people start this at the beginning of the year. The vision was simple enough that other people could take it. So a good vision has to be easily articulatable. You have to be able to say it in a way that a 5-year-old can get it and other people can get it. Back to Jobs, he said he wanted a design that anyone could pick up and use, and people can. You can give an infant, much to some infants' detriment, you can give them an iPad and they can figure it out. Animals can do it. You can go on YouTube and spend way too much time looking at animals operating iPads, and that's pretty visionary design, right? So part of it is that. The other part, though, and this is where, there's really incredible visionaries who are working at Arby's, and no offense to people who sell fast food sandwiches, but there are people who they have the best idea in the world, and what they didn't have is data, or they didn't have the ability to bring a team under them, or they didn't have some other big, giant chunk of the puzzle. If you are a visionary, you must also have the skills to know what pieces of the puzzle are missing and how can I fill those in with other people? How can I make other people be part of this plan, this system, movement? The good and bad of words like movement is we'll say things like, we want to start a movement around drinks. That's not usually much of a movement, unless the movement is some sort of buy one, get one. For every water you buy, we'll send another one to Africa. Those kinds of movements are great. But a lot of times with vision, what happens is you can see the thing, but you can't get everyone else to want to go with you. That's important. After that, the third thing about any important vision is you have to have the math. You have to be able to see the numbers. And even if they're not there yet, you have to know what's the map to get to the numbers. How do I use time in such a way that I can earn some money? How do I use money in such a way that I can earn some time? And until you kind of have that navigation going, it's a lot harder to accomplish the things in your vision. So those are the 3 pieces.
It's really helpful. So thinking of, again, all the coaching you do on a day-to-day basis, someone comes to you and say, whether it's a time management issue, I'm wasting a lot of time, or I'm just simply overwhelmed, like life is just zany, and everything's coming at me hard. Let's go down that road.
I have a set answer for this one because I get it a lot. I think it's one of the most common things that happens in leadership environments. And that's why I say that leadership is options management. There's only two problems that seem to happen a lot in life. We either have too many options or we feel like we have no options. So think about therapy, right? You know, you get somebody in the couch, they're like, I don't know what to do anymore. I've run out of options. You go, oh, well, maybe there's another way to look at this. Maybe there's this whole other option we haven't even considered yet. That's options management. What happens in business is we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do this, or I could say yes. And suddenly your calendar's full like crazy. It's amazing how many people schedule their day to 100%. And I say, hey, has your computer ever gone to 100%? Have you seen what that does? It bogs down, everything stops. 100% is bad for cars. So get your RPM up to 1,000, see what happens. Your car's gonna break in about 8 seconds. You know, nothing wants to operate at 100%. And yet our schedule, we put more than 100%. We schedule our calendar to 120%, like a bunch of weird monkeys. I schedule my calendar to 40%. My calendar today had nothing on it, including this call, which was an accident. But I had nothing on my calendar because I was planning to have conversations with people. And guess what? I had 4 or 5 meetings, but I had all the room in the world for them. Why? Because that's another way you can do it. Oh, but I'm not the boss. I don't schedule the meetings. You know what? You can manage so much more than you think with your options. Geez, I know you want to do a meeting about this. I don't think I have a lot to contribute to this meeting. Can I just give you my notes and not show up to this meeting? You'd be amazed how many times someone will go, yeah, that'll work fine. Leadership is options management. So I think that with my coaching, that's one of the primary things I do. The other is I try to help people navigate somewhat complex conversations, because I think we forget either that there's too much emotion in things, or we forget how to disarm the wrong use of emotion in things when we have conversations at work. You know, I don't like how you do something. Obviously, that person's going to go on their back foot because we put them in. I don't like how you is not the good start of any conversation. Oh, there's this thing that's happening and it's really bugging me and I'm having a hard time dealing with it. I was wondering if you could help me find a way to do this a different way. Someone's way more open to that, right? So that's where my coaching lands me a lot of times, is in human interaction and understanding how to better sort of parse their efforts and their time. And I do a lot of, I'll end the answer after this, but I do a lot of audits. I couldn't think of the word, time audits of people. I go and I look and say, where are we using our time? Because everyone will say, oh, I'm just doing the important things. And I will find almost every time, 90-something% of the times, I will find massive swaths of their calendar that is not meetings that they need to be in. Oh, really? Because your subordinates can't handle that meeting without you? You need to somehow sit in on that and not just get an update on that meeting? Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. And that's, I think we treat, this is another one of my little isms. We treat time as if it's infinite and money as if it's not. And it's just crazy because there's always more money. You know, even when I'm at my worst with money, there's other ways to go make money, but time is finite. And it's amazing how we throw it around like it isn't. And I'm not one of those people that tries to be super productive. I just want to be able to choose to waste my time instead of let other people do it for me.
When you say time audit, I also think energy audit, right? We have our time, but we also have managing our energy. And I know you've written, some brilliant stuff on that. Talk about protecting our energy.
It is such a real thing because it's amazing. All right, easy example for me. I hate talking about finances, personal finances. Work finances, I could talk all day about. I hate talking about my personal finances because I'm always in some weird situation where I need something different than I have it, or I've made some mistake or something like that. So if some bill comes in, or, one of my children is like, I just decided I have to do this thing and it's like $4,000 I didn't expect I was going to have to spend. If you tell me that early in the day, I'm going to lose the whole day. I'm going to be ruined because it just eats a lot of stress energy in my head the minute I talk about money stuff, especially unexpected expenses, which happens in everyone's life. So I have a rule in my universe where if you want me to actually have a reasonable day, you have to talk money kind of mid-afternoon. It has to be like 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. in the family world, So if my children contact me and they're like, Dad, I need a thing, better be between 1 and 4 or it's not going to be a great day. I think that I think we all know those things, like what are the trigger things that bug us. Let's try to minimize the number of those we have to have in a day, or not stack them up. Or if we need to be creative, let's do creative stuff right at that moment where it makes perfect sense for us. I'm super creative either very early in the day or like early mid-afternoon. And then I'm not super creative at night. Other people are like, oh, I'm only just getting going, come 9 p.m. I think once you know your cadence, you should schedule your interactions with other human beings around that, because you can't control what they're going to say, but you can at least sort of sequence when it's going to happen. And I think that's important.
And let's talk a little more about interactions, because I see you as someone who writes in ways that not only make people think, you certainly do that, but you make them feel, and you help them feel seen and understood. And that says to me that you're someone then who in your life, you're practicing that, right? Nobody's perfect, but talk about that journey. Has that always, that level of empathy and compassion, has that come naturally to you? Have you developed it? Because you focus that spotlight again and again on this human interaction.
I was a very selfish, very greedy child. I did a lot of things in ways that weren't exactly the best way to get my thing that I wanted. And I definitely didn't interact in ways that were open and warm to other people in several times. I was considered very sweet and bright and many, many things. I had many compliments, but sort of when I re-audit my childhood and the way I was brought up, and especially around things like the holidays, was I selfish? So I learned this all. This was not like I wasn't born with it. Like if someone's at home thinking, or wherever they're paying attention to us, if they're thinking, I'm not that kind of person, me neither. What I did learn was, gee, how's this going to make someone else feel? Or is there a way I can talk about something such that other people can, net some value out of it? And that's, I think, where you start to learn these things, or how's someone going to persist in some way. Everyone is the hero of their own story. If I have some kind of negative feedback I can give to someone, is there a way I can give it such that they can still be the hero? Can I invite them to be a hero in their story? So I think that I learned all of that, Doctor. I none of this was on deck for me. I learned how to be much more thoughtful, compassionate. By the way, thoughtful for me, I have to prompt myself all the time. Oh, it's this person's birthday. What would be the appropriate things to say to this person on their birthday? It does not come natural, except I've had so many years of practicing that forced effort that I'm there.
I'm going to wrap us with a term that you shared out that was impactful for me. And you said complain with compassion, right? So if you have a complaint, if you have an issue with someone, instead of just going in and lowering the hammer, do a check-in, like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Because that person very well might have a reason for doing what they're doing. So I got that from you. Thank you for that, Chris. And on behalf of all our viewers and listeners, thank you. This was a really great conversation. And thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.